Who was Nicander of Colophon? Imagine a pharmacist who, instead of writing prescriptions, composed poetry about poisons and cures. That was Nicander of Colophon, the man who penned the first guides to antidotes and verse, saving lives with his pen and his knowledge of herbs. In a time when medicine was often a mix of science, superstition, and experimentation, Nicander of Colophon stood out as a unique figure in the ancient world. Born around the 2nd century BC in the city of Colophon, located in Ionia, modern-day Turkey, Nicander was not just a poet, but also a pharmacologist. His work represents one of the earliest known efforts to systematize the study of poisons and antidotes, laying the groundwork for what would later become the field of toxicology. Nicander's reputation as both a scientist and a poet reflects the way knowledge was often shared in ancient Greece. Science and literature were not seen as separate realms, but as complementary fields. In fact, poetry was a respected method for transmitting technical knowledge, making it easier to memorize complex information about plants, poisons, and cures. Nicander's use of verse to communicate vital medical information allowed his works to reach a wide audience, from physicians and healers to educated citizens fascinated by the natural world. Nicander was born into a world where the pursuit of knowledge was highly valued. Colophon, one of the Ionian cities of Asia Minor, was an important cultural hub, particularly known for its intellectual atmosphere. This region produced many philosophers, poets, and scientists who contributed to the development of Greek thought. Colophon itself had a long history of being associated with healing and herbal medicine, and Nicander's family was believed to be involved in both literature and medical practice, which likely influenced his path. Greek medicine during this period was still evolving, combining observations of the natural world with the influence of religious practices and traditional remedies. It was common for healers to use herbs, minerals, and animal parts in treatments, but the scientific study of these substances was still in its early stages. Figures like Hippocrates and Galen are more often remembered today, but Nicander's work focused specifically on the dangers of poisoning, a common concern in the ancient world, and how these toxins could be countered with natural remedies. Nicander probably wasn't the type of pharmacist who'd just tell you to take the tablets and call him in the morning. Instead, he'd recite a few lines of poetry about the right herbs to save your life from snake venom. What makes Nicander particularly fascinating is his combination of art and science. He wasn't just a pharmacist scribbling down cures, he was a poet who turned his medical knowledge into beautifully composed verse. His two major works, Theriaca and Alexipharmaca, are written in hexameter, the same poetic structure used in Homer's epics. While Homer's poems told the tales of great warriors and gods, Nicander's focused on something far more practical: how to survive being poisoned by an animal or toxic plant. Nicander's poetry wasn't merely an artistic exercise. It was a way to educate. In a time when literacy wasn't widespread and medical texts were rare, poetry was a memorable and accessible way to pass on vital information. By encoding his medical knowledge into verse, Nicander made it easier for people, particularly healers and physicians, to remember the key details needed to treat poisons. In his Theriaca, for instance, Nicander describes in detail the symptoms caused by bites from snakes, scorpions, spiders, and other venomous creatures. He doesn't stop at identifying the symptoms, he goes on to explain the best remedies for each kind of bite or sting, often recommending specific plants or compounds that could be used as antidotes. His other major work, Alexipharmaca, addresses poisons that come from plants and other ingested substances. In this text, Nicander dives into the various types of poisons people might consume, whether accidentally or intentionally, and provides remedies for neutralizing them. He covers everything from the toxic effects of hemlock, the same poison used to execute Socrates, to dangerous mushrooms and other plants. Why was Nicander so focused on poisons and antidotes? In the ancient world, the threat of poisoning was a very real and constant danger. Whether from venomous animals, toxic plants, or deliberate poisoning, a common political tool in ancient courts, the risk of being poisoned was something everyone from common citizens to kings had to be aware of. Herbalists, healers, and physicians needed a solid understanding of how to treat these potentially deadly incidents, and Nicander's work provided a much-needed resource. The Greeks had long been interested in the natural world and how it could both harm and heal. Nicander was building on a tradition that stretched back centuries, to Hippocrates and even earlier, where careful observation of nature was used to develop remedies for a wide variety of ailments. His work was part of a broader Greek effort to understand the natural world in scientific terms through detailed descriptions, empirical observation, and trial and error methods. While Theriaca and Alexipharmaca are the most famous of his works, Nicander was also known to have written on other medical topics, though these texts have been lost to history. His surviving works, however, give us a window into the scientific knowledge and pharmacological practices of the time. Nicander's unique combination of poetry and science placed him within a broader tradition of Greek thinkers who sought to understand the world through both observation and philosophy. He wasn't alone in his endeavor to combine art and science. Many of his contemporaries, such as Theophrastus, the father of botany, also used writing as a means of conveying complex ideas. What makes Nicander stand out, however, is the focus of his work. While others studied plants for their agricultural or aesthetic value, Nicander zeroed in on the dangers of the natural world and how to protect against them. His work on poisons and antidotes was not only practical, but also deeply philosophical. It dealt with life and death situations, where knowledge could mean the difference between survival and death. In this sense, Nicander can be seen as one of the first toxicologists, someone who systematically studied the effects of toxic substances and sought ways to counteract them. His works were used not only in his lifetime, but for centuries afterward, as Roman scholars like Pliny the Elder and Galen referred to his knowledge in their own writings on medicine and pharmacology. The works of Nicander's Theriaca is a detailed exploration of animal venoms and their effects on the human body, all written in hexameter verse. The poem, spanning over 958 lines, describes the symptoms of various bites and stings from venomous creatures such as snakes, spiders, scorpions, and other dangerous animals that inhabited the ancient world. More importantly, Nicander outlines treatments and antidotes that could be applied in the case of envenomation. In an age where encounters with wild animals were common, knowing how to deal with their bites could mean the difference between life and death. Nicander wrote Theriaca as both a medical reference and a piece of literature, meant to be memorized and passed down by physicians and healers. The text is rich in vivid descriptions of the effects of venom, helping readers understand what to expect in terms of symptoms, from swelling and dizziness to fever, convulsions, and death. For instance, Nicander describes how the venom of a viper can cause agonizing pain, swelling, and discoloration of the skin, eventually leading to death if not treated. He also offers remedies, recommending the use of olive oil, honey, and various herbs to soothe the pain and neutralize the poison. His recommendations are often a blend of herbal remedies and folk medicine, showcasing the practical knowledge available in his time. The structure of Theriaca allows for easy reference, which was essential for healers and physicians who needed quick access to this knowledge. Each section of the poem is dedicated to a different animal, making it possible for the reader to look up specific treatments based on the type of envenomation. While Theriaca dealt with the external dangers of animal bites, Nicander's other famous work, Alexipharmaca, focuses on the poisons that people might accidentally or intentionally ingest. This poem, also written in hexameter, spans 630 lines and provides an extensive guide to identifying different toxins found in plants, fungi, and other substances, as well as the antidotes that could be used to counteract their effects. Alexipharmaca is a fascinating text because it delves into the darker side of ancient society, where poisoning was not just a matter of accident, but also of political intrigue and assassination. For rulers, aristocrats, and even everyday citizens, the threat of being poisoned was a very real concern. In fact, poisoning had become a well-known method of eliminating rivals or enemies, particularly in political circles. Nicander's text, therefore, served not only as a medical guide, but also as a survival manual for those who feared they might fall victim to such schemes. In Alexipharmaca, Nicander describes various plants and substances that could be deadly, such as hemlock, aconite, and nightshade. He details the symptoms of poisoning by these substances, which could include vomiting, paralysis, and even hallucinations, depending on the poison involved. Nicander also provides antidotes for each poison, often involving the use of other plants, minerals, or animal-based remedies. For instance, he suggests the use of vinegar and charcoal to counteract certain poisons, as well as specific herbs that were believed to have detoxifying properties. The text also emphasizes the importance of timely intervention. Many of the antidotes prescribed by Nicander were most effective when administered quickly after the poison was ingested, highlighting the urgency of proper medical knowledge in ancient times. His advice likely saved many lives in a world where access to immediate medical care was rare. One of the most interesting aspects of Nicander's work is that he chose to write these medical guides in the form of poetry. In today's world, we wouldn't expect to find a scientific manual written in verse. But in Nicander's time, this approach made sense for a few key reasons. First, poetry was a respected medium for conveying important information. It was easier to memorize long passages of verse than it was to remember a prose text, which made it ideal for transmitting medical knowledge in an era where written texts were rare and literacy was not widespread. By encoding his medical advice in verse, Nicander ensured that it could be memorized by healers and passed down orally, long before the widespread availability of written texts. Second, the use of poetry lent Nicander's work a cultural legitimacy. In ancient Greece, poetry was associated with the great thinkers and intellectuals of the past, such as Homer and Hesiod. By using the same poetic meter as these legendary figures, Nicander elevated his medical writings to a higher status, making them more likely to be preserved and studied by future generations. Finally, writing in poetry allowed Nicander to paint vivid pictures of the symptoms and remedies he described. His detailed and often dramatic descriptions of the effects of poisons made his works more engaging and memorable, helping to ensure that the crucial information about treatments would stick in the minds of those who read or recited his poems. Imagine if your doctor today prescribed treatments in rhyme. For snake bites dire, try garlic, honey, or fresh-cut briar. Nicander knew that a little rhythm made medicine easier to remember. The works of Nicander didn't remain confined to the libraries of Colophon. They spread across the Greek and Roman world, influencing physicians, philosophers, and scholars for centuries. Nicander's Theriaca and Alexipharmaca were frequently referenced by later Roman authors, including Pliny the Elder and Galen, two of the most influential figures in ancient science and medicine. Nicander's work on poisons and antidotes was particularly valuable during times of warfare, when soldiers and civilians alike were exposed to dangerous animals and the potential for poisoning by enemies. His texts became essential tools for military doctors who needed quick and effective remedies for common battlefield injuries, such as snake bites or scorpion stings. In Rome, Nicander's works were considered important enough that they were translated and studied by some of the leading medical minds of the era. Galen, in particular, was influenced by Nicander's approach to antidotes, and his own medical treatises often referenced or built upon the knowledge Nicander had compiled centuries earlier. While Nicander's works were highly valued for their practical applications, they also had a cultural and literary impact. The poetic style of Theriaca and Alexipharmaca ensured that they were appreciated not just for their medical content, but also for their artistic merit. As a result, Nicander's writings were preserved through the centuries and continued to be read and studied long after his death. The science of poisons and Nicander's cures in Nicander's time, knowledge of poisons and their effects on the human body was essential, especially given the frequent encounters with venomous animals, toxic plants, and the ever-present danger of deliberate poisoning. While today we have the modern science of toxicology, which systematically studies the effects of toxic substances, Nicander's work was a precursor to this field, offering the first comprehensive descriptions of how different poisons worked and how they could be treated. Ancient Greece was filled with natural threats, from venomous snakes and scorpions to toxic plants like hemlock and nightshade. In this environment, medical practitioners needed practical knowledge about how to counteract poisons, especially in a time when accidents with these substances were common. Additionally, poisoning was often used as a tool of political assassination, making it even more critical for those in power to understand how to counteract toxins. Nicander's focus on these life-threatening substances wasn't just theoretical. It was grounded in the real dangers of his time. He cataloged poisons from animals and plants, studied their effects on the human body, and experimented with different antidotes made from natural remedies. One of the primary focuses of Nicander's Theriaca was the venomous bites and stings from animals, particularly snakes, spiders, and scorpions. In ancient Greece, the risk of envenomation was a common concern, especially in rural areas where people regularly encountered dangerous creatures. Nicander provides detailed descriptions of how different venoms affect the body. For example, he explains that a viper's bite causes severe swelling, discoloration, and intense pain that radiates from the wound. He even delves into the psychological effects, describing how victims often experience a feeling of impending doom, a vivid touch that helped readers recognize the symptoms quickly. Nicander also carefully outlines the remedies for these bites. For a viper bite, he suggests applying a mixture of herbs to the wound, along with olive oil and honey to soothe the area and counteract the poison. He believed in the power of natural substances to neutralize the toxins and reduce the symptoms, relying on garlic, onions, and specific plants like wild rue to act as antidotes. Nicander also emphasized the importance of keeping the victim calm to prevent the poison from spreading quickly through the body, an insight that echoes modern first aid advice. Similarly, Nicander addressed the stings of scorpions and spiders, which were also common in ancient Greece. He describes how the venom of a scorpion causes sharp pain and a burning sensation, recommending that healers apply vinegar and crush herbs to the sting. For spider bites, Nicander suggested using poultices made from barley and honey, which he believed would draw the poison out of the body. While Theriaca focused on animal venoms, Nicander's Alexipharmaca turned its attention to the dangers of toxic plants and other ingested poisons. Plants like hemlock, aconite, and belladonna were well known in the ancient world for their deadly effects, and Nicander sought to understand how these substances worked and, more importantly, how they could be countered. Hemlock, the poison famously used to execute the philosopher Socrates, was one of the most feared plants in ancient Greece. Nicander described how hemlock causes muscle paralysis, beginning at the extremities and working its way toward the heart, eventually leading to death. To combat hemlock poisoning, Nicander recommended a combination of charcoal and vinegar, which he believed could absorb and neutralize the toxin before it spread too far. Nicander was also fascinated by the effects of aconite, commonly known as wolfsbane, a plant that causes rapid respiratory failure. The antidote Nicander suggested for aconite poisoning involved the use of clay mixed with wine, or remedy that reflects the ancient belief that clay could absorb toxins from the body. In addition to these highly toxic plants, Nicander detailed remedies for mushroom poisoning and other accidental ingestions. He was aware that many fungi, while edible, could also be deadly if the wrong species were consumed. His advice often involved inducing vomiting and consuming milk or egg whites, which he believed could coat the stomach and prevent the poison from being absorbed. Nicander not only cataloged poisons and antidotes, but also described how to administer these treatments. His suggestions ranged from the straightforward to the surprisingly complex, considering the limited medical tools of his time. For animal bites, Nicander often recommended applying poultices made from crushed herbs directly to the wound. These poultices were meant to draw out the venom, reducing swelling and neutralizing the toxin. In cases of more severe poisoning, Nicander suggested combining internal and external remedies. For instance, drinking a mixture of vinegar and herbs while simultaneously applying a paste to the skin. When it came to ingested poisons, Nicander's approach varied depending on the type of toxin. He frequently advised inducing vomiting to expel the poison from the stomach, followed by the consumption of detoxifying substances like milk, egg whites, or charcoal. Nicander believed these substances could either bind to the poison or coat the stomach lining, preventing further absorption of the toxin into the bloodstream. Nicander's antidotes weren't just physical remedies, he also recognized the importance of mental state and recovery. He advised healers to keep the patient calm, explaining that panic or heightened stress could worsen symptoms or accelerate the poison's spread through the body. This holistic approach shows that Nicander understood not just the biological effects of toxins, but also the psychological and emotional impact of being poisoned. Nicander's contributions to the understanding of toxins and antidotes were not just confined to his own era. His works had a lasting impact on the field of toxicology, particularly in how later scholars approached the treatment of poisons. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder and Galen cited Nicander's descriptions of poisons and antidotes in their own medical treatises, ensuring that his knowledge was passed down through the centuries. His approach to classifying poisons, describing their symptoms, and recommending specific antidotes helped lay the groundwork for the formal study of toxicology, which would eventually become a recognized scientific discipline. Nicander's focus on the relationship between the poison and the cure and his belief that many antidotes could be found in nature continues to influence modern pharmacology and toxicology today. Nicander, the father of antidotes, Nicander of Colophon's work was groundbreaking in the context of Greek medicine. While earlier figures like Hippocrates had focused on the causes of disease and general medical practice, Nicander was unique in his systematic study of toxins and antidotes. His contributions came at a time when knowledge of natural substances was growing, and his detailed catalog of poisons, symptoms, and cures filled a crucial gap in the understanding of toxicology. Nicander's systematic approach, especially in works like Theriaca and Alexipharmaca, offered a level of precision and practicality that physicians and healers of his time greatly valued. His descriptions of specific symptoms caused by different toxins helped physicians diagnose poisonings more accurately, while his recommended remedies provided a foundation for treatment. In addition, Nicander's works reflected a growing Greek interest in the natural world. Plants, animals, and minerals were all seen as both sources of healing and danger, and Nicander explored this duality in his poetry. His integration of practical medical knowledge into literary form allowed his work to transcend its purely scientific purpose, embedding itself in Greek cultural tradition. Nicander's influence on Greek medicine was further cemented by the school of physicians who followed in his footsteps. These practitioners adopted his methods and used his texts as reference guides, ensuring that his insights into the natural world and pharmacology became part of the core medical education of the time. Nicander's influence didn't stop at the borders of Greece. His works were eventually carried into the Roman Empire, where they had a profound impact on Roman medicine and pharmacology. In Rome, poisoning was not only a medical concern, but also a common method of assassination, especially among the political elite. This made Nicander's guides particularly valuable to Roman physicians, who were often called upon to treat poisoned individuals. Pliny the Elder, the famous Roman naturalist and author, frequently cited Nicander in his monumental work Natural History. Pliny admired Nicander's knowledge of poisons and antidotes, using his Greek predecessor's insights to inform his own extensive descriptions of herbal medicine and toxicology. In a time when both animal venom and plant-based poisons posed significant threats, Nicander's work was seen as essential for survival. Similarly, Galen, one of the most famous Roman physicians, studied Nicander's text closely. Galen was particularly interested in therapeutics, the use of medicine to treat disease, and he found Nicander's detailed antidotes highly useful. Nicander's works provided Galen with a practical foundation for treating poisonings, which he incorporated into his own writings on pharmacology. This marked the beginning of Nicander's lasting influence on Roman medical practice, which would continue to shape the field for centuries. Nicander's texts were even translated into Latin, making his knowledge more accessible to the Roman world. His poetic descriptions of poisons and their antidotes were preserved and studied, helping to build a bridge between Greek and Roman scientific thought. Nicander's antidotes weren't just theoretical, they were put into practice during some of Rome's most tumultuous times. Poisoning was a serious concern in the Roman Senate and among the imperial family, where political rivals frequently used toxic substances to eliminate competition. Knowing how to diagnose and treat poisonings became essential for survival in the highest ranks of Roman society. One famous case involves Emperor Claudius, who was reportedly poisoned by his wife Agrippina with a dish of mushrooms laced with aconite. While the exact methods of his poisoning remain debated by historians, stories like this demonstrate how poisons were a real and present danger in Roman politics. Physicians would have turned to texts like Nicander's Alexipharmaca to identify the poison and apply the appropriate antidote. Nicander's methods of treating poisonings, especially those from ingested toxins, became central to Roman medical practice. His suggestions, such as using charcoal or inducing vomiting to expel poisons, were used by Roman physicians to counteract a wide variety of toxins. Whether treating snake bites in the provinces or combating political assassinations in the capital, Nicander's antidotes were in high demand. In addition to treating political figures, Roman military physicians also relied on Nicander's work, especially during campaigns in North Africa, Asia Minor, and Syria, where soldiers were exposed to dangerous wildlife, including venomous snakes and scorpions. Nicander's insights helped military doctors develop practical treatments that could be administered in the field, saving countless lives. Nicander's legacy didn't end with the fall of the Roman Empire. His works were preserved and transmitted through the Byzantine and Islamic empires during the Middle Ages, playing a significant role in the development of medieval medicine. Greek and Roman medical texts were highly valued by scholars in the Islamic world, where they were translated into Arabic and studied extensively. In the Islamic Golden Age, scholars such as Avicenna and Al-Razi built upon Nicander's insights into toxicology, refining and expanding the knowledge of poisons and antidotes. The translation of Nicander's works into Arabic helped preserve his contributions and ensure that his knowledge reached scholars far beyond Greece and Rome. These scholars further developed the field of toxicology, incorporating new findings while continuing to reference Nicander's original descriptions of poisons and cures. During the Renaissance, Nicander's works experienced a resurgence in popularity as European scholars sought to reconnect with the classical knowledge of Greece and Rome. Translations of his works into Latin and vernacular languages ensured that his writings on poisons remained part of the European medical curriculum. Renaissance physicians frequently turned to his texts for guidance on treating toxic exposures, particularly as the use of poisons in political intrigue continued to flourish during this period. Legacy in modern pharmacology and toxicology. Nicander's works, which had been preserved through the Byzantine and Islamic periods, experienced a significant resurgence during the Renaissance. As European scholars began to delve into the classical knowledge of Greece and Rome, there was a renewed interest in the ancient texts that dealt with medicine, toxicology, and natural sciences. Alongside other classical authors such as Hippocrates, Galen, and Dioscorides, Nicander's Theriaca and Alexipharmaca were rediscovered and translated into Latin and vernacular languages. During the Renaissance, intellectuals and physicians sought to revive the holistic approach to medicine and pharmacology that had been practiced in the classical world. Nicander's focus on antidotes and the natural world fit perfectly into this revival, as herbal medicine and the study of natural remedies were once again gaining prominence. His writings were studied in the great universities of Europe, and his methods were often referenced by physicians, herbalists, and natural philosophers. For Renaissance scholars, Nicander's work represented a blend of scientific observation and poetic expression, a hallmark of the classical tradition. His detailed descriptions of the effects of poisons and the plants used as antidotes were valued not only for their medical insights, but also for their contributions to botany and the natural sciences. Nicander's influence on toxicology became more apparent as the field itself evolved into a formal scientific discipline. Toxicology, the study of poisons and their effects on living organisms, was a field that grew from the foundations laid by early figures like Nicander. His method of systematically identifying toxins, describing their effects, and proposing remedies is echoed in modern toxicological practices. In the centuries following the Renaissance, scientists and physicians began to explore more systematic methods for understanding poisons, building on the ancient foundations. Paracelsus, the 16th century physician and alchemist, famously declared that the dose makes the poison, an idea that finds its roots in the ancient Greek tradition of pharmakos, a concept that understood poisons and remedies as interconnected forces. Though Paracelsus brought new ideas to the table, the methods of diagnosing and treating poisons that Nicander championed remained at the heart of toxicology. Modern toxicologists still rely on many of the fundamental principles that Nicander established. The idea of observing symptoms, analyzing the nature of the poison, and applying an appropriate antidote is central to toxicology today, just as it was in Nicander's time. His insights into the natural world and his belief in the healing power of plants also continue to influence contemporary pharmacology, especially in the growing interest in natural and plant-based remedies. Nicander's focus on antidotes and remedies played a key role in the development of pharmacology, the science of drugs and their effects on the human body. His texts laid the groundwork for the use of natural substances, plants, minerals, and animal products as medicinal treatments. His detailed descriptions of the herbs and compounds used to neutralize poisons helped build an early pharmacopoeia, a collection of medicinal knowledge that served as the foundation for modern drug development. In today's world, pharmacologists continue to study natural substances, much like Nicander did. His belief that the natural world contained both poisons and cures has been borne out by modern research, with many of today's medicines being derived from plants and other natural sources. For example, morphine, a painkiller derived from the opium poppy, and digitalis, a heart medication derived from the foxglove plant, are both examples of drugs that come from nature's pharmacy, an idea that would have been familiar to Nicander. The modern study of phytochemistry, the branch of chemistry concerned with the chemical processes associated with plants, owes much to the early work of figures like Nicander. His detailed observations of the effects of plant-based toxins and antidotes laid the groundwork for the scientific analysis of medicinal plants. Today, the search for new drugs continues to be inspired by the natural world, with pharmacologists exploring rainforests, deserts, and even the ocean in search of new compounds that can be used to treat disease. Nicander probably would have made an excellent pharmaceutical researcher today. Just swap the scrolls for a lab notebook, and he'd be in business discovering the next big cure. Nicander's focus on natural remedies has found a new audience in the modern era, where there is a growing interest in alternative medicine and herbal remedies. As people increasingly look for more natural approaches to health and wellness, Nicander's writings on the medicinal properties of plants and herbs seem particularly relevant. Today, natural medicine has become a multi-billion-dollar industry, with people seeking out herbal supplements, plant-based medicines, and alternative treatments. While the effectiveness of some of these remedies is still debated, the trend reflects a return to the ancient Greek philosophy of finding cures in the natural world of philosophy that Nicander helped shape. In the context of modern pharmacology, Nicander's work reminds us that nature has always been a source of both healing and danger. His belief that plants could be both toxic and medicinal reflects the duality that scientists continue to explore today. Many modern drugs are derived from plants that are toxic in high doses, yet beneficial when used in controlled amounts, precisely the kind of thinking Nicander pioneered. Even today, Nicander's contributions to toxicology and pharmacology are studied in medical schools and pharmacy programs around the world. His work is often referenced as an early example of evidence-based medicine, where observations about symptoms and natural remedies were systematically recorded and analyzed. Medical students learn about Nicander's approach to treating envenomation and poisoning, studying the early roots of what would become toxicology and pharmacology. Beyond the practical applications of his work, Nicander's blending of poetry and science is also studied in the context of medical humanities. His use of verse to convey important medical knowledge demonstrates the powerful role that literature can play in science and how the arts and sciences have long been intertwined. Nicander's legacy reminds us that the roots of modern science are often found in unexpected places. The fact that he chose to write his medical knowledge in hexameter verse, the same structure used in Homer's epics, makes his work unique in the annals of scientific history. His poetic approach shows that the communication of scientific ideas can be just as important as the science itself, a lesson that remains relevant for scientists and doctors today. Medical school probably hasn't changed that much. Students today are still studying figures like Nicander, though thankfully they don't have to memorize it all in verse. Final conclusion: Nicander of Colophon's contributions to the fields of toxicology and pharmacology are truly timeless. As the first known figure to systematically study poisons and antidotes, his work laid the foundation for a field that remains crucial to this day. Whether he was diagnosing a snake bite or providing a remedy for ingested poison, Nicander's blend of science and poetry continues to influence the way we understand and treat toxins. His legacy endures not only in the history of Greek and Roman medicine, but also in the modern practices of pharmacology and toxicology, where his methods of careful observation and natural remedies still resonate. By bridging the worlds of art and science, Nicander created a body of work that has transcended time, continuing to inspire scholars, physicians, and poets alike. So, what do you think about Nicander's unique combination of poetry and medicine? Would you trust a poet-pharmacist with your health today? Let us know your thoughts on how Nicander's ancient wisdom still influences our world today.
By my side, intense, strong, no fear to face, nowhere to hide, intense. I subscribe to this channel, click like today, because content like this just lights my way, intense and slow.